odd when it goes. We're live. We always look odd when it goes live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming back to the Take a Stand online conference. This is an event where I am interviewing 35 incredible women who have experienced abuse in their life in one shape or another, and they're sharing their stories of triumph over trauma. Now, as I talk to Mindi today, I want you to not pay attention is the wrong word, but if you're finding that you've become emotionally triggered, something's feeling uncomfortable, you're not feeling quite right, you can either reach out to Mindi or reach out to your close circle of friends. If things are feeling a little bit more chaotic than they normally would, make sure that you check in with your doctor, or even take yourself to the local A&E centre if things are feeling like you're really spiraling out of control. It's perfectly normal. Most of us have been there. It's just part of the trauma recovery and healing journey. It's just as it is. But what I will do is I will pop Mindi's details below the video. So if you want to reach out, you can do. You can connect personally. You can visit her website and you can arrange to have a conversation if that is possible. But as we are on YouTube, I now have to do the YouTube bit, and that is, if you are interested in living life trauma-free, this is what this YouTube channel is all about. So please do consider subscribing, click that notification bell, and give us a thumbs up and ask a question if you are enjoying the content. That will really help us to get the message out to a much wider audience. Okay, I've sold myself now. Hi, Mindi.
Hi, Wendy. Thanks so much for having me today. And I'm just so excited that you're doing this event for people. It's just time that women have a voice. And we're seeing that more and more in the world, and it's very exciting. And so your event helps reinforce how important it is for people to tell their stories. So thank you for having me and for doing this whole event.
Wow, thank you for sharing the story it is that you're going to share. You know, I think a big part of my recovery and healing journey was listening to other women's stories and going, oh, well, I never knew that. I knew that I was feeling that, but I never knew that was common or other people felt it or that was their experience. I didn't have any concept of that what I was experiencing was wrong. So I think when we hear stories, it helps people to understand their own experiences. And plus, I don't know about you, but I think there's such a lack of education around these subjects.
For sure.
It's like you've got the academics, but you've got very little in the middle. And actually, there are so many modalities that people can use to heal and recover that I think this is a great opportunity for us to start sharing a different perspective of opportunities for people to recover and heal. But anyway, that's enough about me.
Oh, I totally
want to hear all about you. I want to hear all about you. And if you could share with me a story of triumph over trauma in your life, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I would love to. I feel like my story has been 50 years in the making, which is how old I am. I turned 50 last month. And like a lot of people, maybe all of us who experienced really severe childhood trauma in our early adult life, we don't recognize why we're struggling the way we do. When we experience a lot of adversity as kids, we have to cope by suppressing. So my coping style was suppress, deny, people please, perfectionism. And so when we learn to cope like that as kids to get through really tough times, then we cope with our adult life in the very same way. So my experience as an adult, as a young adult, is I became very high achieving. I sought advanced degrees. I sought being well known in my field and my profession because I had this idea if people could validate me externally, I would feel better. Because all the while I was dealing with really severe depression, anxiety. I just really didn't believe in myself, and it affected my relationships. It affected my health. From the time I was at least 18, I had chronic health issues with pain, issues with fatigue. I had all kinds of really unpleasant symptoms. And again, like a lot of people with childhood trauma, I went from doctor to doctor trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And like you said, our society just really doesn't understand the connection between how we function with our limitations in life and what it had to do with how we grew up. So I became even further traumatized by dealing with a medical system for a couple decades that really didn't understand me. And so I just want to send some extra love to people who've been in that position, because it's hard enough to deal with so much pain and illness and insecurity and then be blamed for it by a system we go to for help. So that went on, Wendy, for probably 20 years. And finally, my health got to a point where I couldn't function anymore. I'm a therapist by training. And one day I couldn't go into the office. Like, I had crossed the threshold by which I just couldn't really live my life very well at all anymore. And that was a great turning point for me, because it really forced me into a space where I had to heal myself. So one of the good things about being a perfectionist is that it made me really determined to figure things out. Like, I didn't give up on myself, with really a lot of odds stacked against me. After trying forever, feeling very helpless, feeling very alone, we all have to figure out what our why is. And for me, my why was my children. I found myself parenting in ways that didn't reflect what I really wanted to do. And so a combination of my desire to be a really loving mother, and in combination with my desire to feel better physically and emotionally in my life, I figured it out. And I will tell you, the one thing that was really a turning point for me was creating a vision board. And I'll tell you why this helped, because I didn't realize what was possible for me. And I saw an episode of Oprah, and there were 3 women on the show with their vision boards. And I can't tell you how powerful this was for me, because a light bulb went off in my head, because there was a woman on the stage with her poster, and there was a picture of Oprah on her vision board. And wow. That helped me to see, like, wow, like, that's pretty miraculous that she made that happen. And so right after I saw that, I made this huge vision board, and I kind of said to the universe, like, if I'm going to be here, this is the life I want to live, as I sort of showed this artwork that I made with all the things I'd been longing for that I couldn't achieve in my life, which is just personal fulfillment and peace, essentially. And so that really changed my trajectory. It was like the universe saw that I finally meant it, that I wanted to heal. And as I stayed focused on that vision, all kinds of resources came upon my path, different practitioners, listening to different stories, podcasts, interviews, and that helped me get a lot of momentum going in the direction of well-being. And so I've spent the last 10 years really healing myself, really understanding the art form of healing. And what's so beautiful is being a therapist, a trauma therapist, is I've been able to use what I learned to heal myself to work with clients in all kinds of ways, in group settings and individual settings. And it's profoundly fulfilling to both create this sense of joy in my life that I never thought was possible, and to now know how to help other people do that as well.
I love what you just said about the art of healing. I think that's a great book. Someone must have written a book called The Art of Healing. If not, grab the same name. I know you've just written a book.
Yes. Yeah, I did. The last 3 years I spent telling my own story of trauma recovery, and the guide that I use in my work with clients, I put it in a book, and it's profoundly healing to write your story. I felt my symptoms just dissolve as I put my words on the page and shared it with people, because there's so much secrecy with trauma, especially when there's incest in families, and we're so conditioned not to tell, which is so toxic for our whole psyche, for our body. Holding things in is just completely destructive. And so being able to tell your story in a really empowered way. I had to wait until I had worked through a lot of anger and resentment that I was holding on to, because I didn't want to bring a book into the world that had a lot of anger and hate in it. And, part of my healing journey has required me to really make sense of why things happened, to get myself out of that place of feeling like I was victimized by life, by my family, by other people, because we really can't be free as long as we're holding on to that belief that we're victims.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at something yesterday, and I was thinking that as much as this person thinks that they're healed and they're helping others and healing, they're actually still very much in a victim mode. And we all do it.
Yes.
And then surrounding themselves with people that are going to reinforce that story of being a victim.
Yes.
And just reliving in that space that isn't necessarily going to serve them. And I think it's so powerful what you said about, you wanted to write the book not from a place of being angry, you didn't use the word toxic, but the word toxic is what's come up in my head, because I've written my own book as well, and it's the best thing I've ever done. I would like to think that I haven't done what we've said and had all, I'm hoping that I've written it in a way. I know it's a hard read, but I've written it in a way where that toxicity isn't coming out and leaking out into other people, because ultimately I never want that, not intentionally, to do that.
And there's always deeper levels of healing for us to achieve.
Yeah.
And so a book that I might write 3 years from now could be even different, more empowering than this book, because the journey never ends. And I know that's hard for some people to hear, but it's also important to recognize that, until we take our last breath, we have the possibility of growing and evolving and creating an even more beautiful life, even more sense of evolution in our own being. So that's the bright side of things, is that we get to keep growing and evolving and healing. And I think it's important to look at that as not the downside, that there is no finish line, because in essence, that's why we're here on the earth, as to grow and evolve and create. And it's cool that never gets to end until our time is over.
And I think it's nice when you step into a space like that. And it's been able to step into a space like that. And it's why I wanted to share these stories, because so many people are stuck in that survival state, are still experiencing and living in the trauma of their past. And it's a bit like what you were saying about, trying to get help within the medical arena for 20 years. That has a devastating long-term effect on decisions you make, how you're looking after yourself, the impact. It's a ripple effect that goes through everything.
Yeah, and it's easy to get really overwhelmed by all the things that happen. And it's understandable why we can get stuck in a victim state, because as kids, we were victimized. Like, that's a fact. And so when we have a hard time moving on, it's because we're wanting people to give us the attention and the validation that we didn't have as kids. But what we have to realize is that it has to come from us. Anything we're seeking outside of ourselves is still causing us to stay in a disempowered state. And so when we realize, like, we're our own healers, that if we're wanting attention from someone else, that's an indicator we need to be giving attention to ourselves. If we want approval and validation, we have to be able to look in our own mirror and say, you're fucking amazing, and not wait for anyone else to tell us that.
There it is.
I love a well-placed F-bomb.
That's one. I'm going to count them. I've decided to count them. It reminds me of what you're saying of unmet needs, of children's unmet needs, when they're not given safety, protection. I think there's about 6 of them, not that I can remember what they are, but it reminds me if those needs aren't met as a child, that you're forever searching for them.
Yes.
You create situations to feel fulfilled, or but the only person that can do that is actually is yourself. No one else can give you those other things. Otherwise, you just end up forever searching and never finding.
Yes, I think that is one of the most important things to understand. And I like to give a concrete example, because a lot of ideas that have to do with trauma healing are very abstract. And so I'll just give an example of how to turn inward and give to yourself what you're seeking for
Fabulous.
outwardly. I saw a doctor once, and I had to share some really delicate information with him. And he was a kind person, but when I left the appointment, I felt I felt down, like something was really bothering me. So I just kind of sat with myself before I left the parking lot. And I was like, "What's bothering me about, this appointment?" And I was like, "Oh, I really wanted him to have more compassion. I wanted him to say, 'I'm so sorry you went through that. That's really tough. Like, you're really courageous. I'm really impressed with how well you're doing, given what you went through.'" And so as I recognized what I was wanting him to say, I just paused, put my hands on my heart, and said those exact same words to myself, which was far more empowering than waiting for someone else to say it for me.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of how concretely, if we can identify those times that we're seeking that attention and validation and comfort, compassion outwardly, it really is just that simple, putting your hands on your heart and saying to yourself what you wish someone said to you. And how powerful is that?
Very powerful. It reminds me of something that I used to speak about, and oh gosh, it's a big part of my recovery was actually learning to talk positively to myself, because
Sure.
I would beat myself up. I mean, if I was a guy talking to myself the way I was talking to myself, it full on out abuse. It just full on out. And that's one thing I had to learn, was to really talk to myself with compassion, no judgment, love, forgiveness. And I don't do it anymore. I don't tolerate it. It's the way I used to talk to myself does not exist anymore. I only talk to myself positively. But I think in the recovering healing journey, I hear a lot of women that just beat themselves up so badly that they don't even leave any space to recover or heal, because what they're saying to themselves is so toxic and so damaging and limiting that it's almost like the door hasn't quite opened for them to move past that.
I think for people who are really self-loathing like that, it's important to ask, why do you think you treat yourself that way? Because if I've asked a lot of women that, they really don't know, and it sort of opens like a new neural pathway in the brain of
Nice.
contemplation and curiosity. And so once that door is open, then we can start exploring what they experienced growing up that gave them the idea there was something wrong with them. Because all it is conditioning, and that
Yeah.
internalized voice of the people who criticized us and had contempt for us, we internalize that. And so I think once people can start realizing why they talk to themselves that way, then that can help them to start turn the corner in terms of being kinder. Of course, it requires healing those wounds. It's horrific to grow up with the people who are supposed to love you, who treat you with contempt and a lot of criticism. And so we have to heal those wounds. One of the concerns in society right now is this idea of toxic positivity, and the idea that if we just strengthen our mindset, we can feel better. And our problems are because we're too negative and too critical. And it's true that mindset is extremely important in healing ourselves and creating a life we love. But we have to look at those wounds that are making it hard for us to have a positive mindset. And so I like to work with both things with people, to heal the wounds while being mindful about what you're focusing on. If we keep focusing on the wounds and the pain in the past, then it's very hard to move through that. So it really requires both from my point of view.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is there, so with all the work that you do, is there one thing that really sticks out to you that is like a common thread that you just see repeatedly over and over again?
I think essentially people who are traumatized don't believe in themselves. When we experience things in childhood where we're not believed, where we experience gaslighting, when parents or other people manipulate us into thinking we're the problem and that they've done nothing wrong, then we fundamentally learn to not believe in ourselves. So we have a lot of self-doubt. makes it hard for us to take risks, to expand our life and do new things. And so what I like to help people to do is learn to believe in themselves. So we have to dismantle, whatever beliefs are in place that cause them to not believe themselves in the first place. Because once we believe in ourselves, we're pretty unstoppable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like polar opposite. It's polar opposite, isn't it? In terms of it's almost like you've just got to completely switch it on itself. It's almost like, it almost feels to me like there's no, I could have this completely wrong, it's just the way I think. There's almost like no middle ground. It's almost like, okay, so I think I'm stupid, but actually I'm not stupid. I'm very intelligent, I'm smart, I'm wise. So it's like the polar opposite of the negative, moving into that more empowered way of thinking, way of being.
We have to look at where we give our power away. So when we're abused and neglected as kids, we don't have power. We are very helpless, very vulnerable. And so we are given the idea that we don't have autonomy over our own lives, that we don't have our own power. So as adults, we have to get really clear, where are we giving other people our power? Where are we letting other people make our decisions, telling us what we can or can't do, and not being in charge of our own life, our own destiny? And so it takes a lot of contemplation. And that's part of staying in that victimhood too, is continuing to give our power to other people who have no business making decisions for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's food for thought for me, actually. Where do I give my power away? That's a really I'm going to make a note of that. I'm going to start journaling on where I give my power away, because I probably do give my power away more than I probably should. I like that. Sorry, I'm pondering on giving my power away.
No, we all do until we've, fully stepped into our own power. For me, I've worked with so many different healers because it's required a lot of different approaches to heal my body and to heal my trauma. And I've become really accustomed to reaching out to other people for support when I need it. And so that's another way that we can give our power away. What we really need to learn to do is go inward and seek our own answers from ourselves. But we have to get grounded and have some nervous system stability before we can trust the wisdom of our own hearts. But I think that's ultimately one of the most important outcomes of trauma recovery, is really learning to trust ourselves and learning to get our own wisdom instead of wanting other people to tell us what to do.
Yeah, I really like one of the things I really liked when I realized I could do it was to, I reached a point where I got whatever I'd learned, I believed it was just faulty, it was wrong, it was just bad parenting and a million other things. But then I learned that I could think more consciously, and I learned to question everything it is that I pretty much thought, or everything it is that I pretty much did. So to start to think consciously about, why do I think like this? Why am I behaving like this? Why am I going this way? Just to constantly question.
I love that. I think curiosity is one of our best attributes in our life, and especially when we're healing, especially when it comes to being triggered, asking like, what is it about that's bothering me so much? Or why do I feel this way? And why am I behaving this way? That's an important aspect of introspection, getting curious about why we think, feel, act the way that we do. And can we do that with compassion and curiosity instead of judgment and criticism?
Yeah. Sometimes I don't always get it either. Sometimes I'll ask myself, trying to figure something out, and I don't get it, but that's okay, because obviously I'm seeing what I need to see in that moment and at that time, and that's good enough. I don't necessarily have to connect as much as I would like to.
Right.
all of the dots to understand why I'm behaving or why I've been triggered that way. I can't always figure it out, but I think just going on that journey and asking yourself the question, why is a good starting point. it's not necessarily the whole picture or the whole answer, but it's still a good starting point to have the realization that something's going on that shouldn't necessarily, that you haven't got answers to, and that's okay.
Yeah, when we start asking why and get curious, it takes us out of our addiction to our thoughts and our programs, because we keep thinking the same way and doing the same things because that is how our brain works. And when we start to ask why, it starts to take us out of that obsessive pattern of doing the same thing, thinking the same thing. And so you're right, like we can't connect all the dots. Sometimes just shedding light on a pattern that's not working can be enough to get it going, in a better direction.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I remember that the next time it happens, because it will happen again for sure.
It will.
but that's okay.
We're all evolving still.
Yeah. What in the work that it is that you do, is there a common theme that pops up?
What I always want to start with in my work with people is to inspire them to create a vision for their life, because we have to have an idea of where we're going or where we want to go to get some momentum going in that direction. And when we've grown up with trauma, we stop believing that our dreams can come true, that things will work out for us. We believe we're the kind of people that things just don't work out for. And I really want to, right in the beginning of my work with people, start to dismantle that way of thinking. And so creating a vision. So I ask people, what do you really want for your life? Where do you want to live? How do you want to feel?
That's an interesting question as well.
Who do you want to be in relationship with?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people are like, well, I wanted to do this, but I didn't think I could. Or some people will say, I have no idea what I want for my life. And so I like to motivate and inspire people to think so much more is possible than they've ever let themselves believe. And so once they have a vision, then when something happens in life, you have a decision to make. So for people who think like, I really want a healthy, fit body that I feel really good in. And so if that's part of your vision, then every decision you make is either moving you towards that vision or away from it. So if you're not moving your body, you're moving away from your vision. If you're eating a lot of processed foods, you're moving away from that vision. And the same thing is true in the relationships that we desire and the professional experiences we want to have. So we have to get really clear on what we want. And then we have to use our will to help us make those decisions in the direction of our desires. And we do have that will because we needed it to get through a really difficult childhood. So it's just tapping into that and not settling anymore for living a life that's limiting.
It's really the first question you said, because when I've worked with clients in the past and I've asked them, what do you want the business to actually give you? And it amazes me how many people don't actually know what they want from the business to give them. But then the other thing that also came to mind, and I don't know if this is a common theme with trauma, is that for myself personally, I find it really difficult to probably think further ahead than 3 months. I find it really difficult to think long term. I can only think short term. Long term for me is just like, I can't do it. It's just not in my comprehension. Is that something that is common with people that have experienced trauma, that the whole time is not necessarily as it should be?
I think with each person, it's important to assess what is comfortable for their nervous system. And so for someone, one person, having a long-term vision might be too stressful because they might feel a lot of internal pressure if they're not able to achieve that dream as quickly as they want to. And so if the timeline is too stressful, then I think it's really important to have a shorter time frame. So by the end of this month, how do you want to feel? What do you want life to be like? And of course, we've got to be realistic because it takes far longer to heal from trauma than any of us want it to take.
I thought it was for life.
If we grew up with parents who are really impatient, which often happens with childhood trauma, then we develop a sense of impatience with ourselves and our own life. We have that expectations that things should be happening right now. And so part of the healing journey is to learn patience. I haven't always appreciated that, I'll tell you, but it's true. It's just a fact.
If looking back on your experiences now, what would you say to your younger self?
I'm extremely proud of my younger self. And I think it's important for all of us to be really proud of our younger selves, because however we coped as kids was perfect. Like, my younger self did exactly what she needed to do to get through childhood in a way that helped me to become the adult that I have been able to become. So a lot of kids under that kind of immense trauma will really shut down. And some people even give up on life and kids will die. Some kids have to really close their heart to protect themselves from pain. And then as adults, they have a hard time feeling love and receiving love. And so for my inner child, I'm just extremely proud of her and thankful to her, because everything she did helped to set my adult life up to be as successful as it could be. And so appreciation, that's the thing I most want to share with my younger self.
Nice. Well, I'm impressed. There was only one F-bomb. I'm like, where's the next one coming?
Well, we'll have to interview again, and
we will.
I won't hold back.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us, and such insight as well. And also, have you got your book handy?
I actually forgot to bring it
Oh!
in with me. But it's called Cycle Breaker, A Guide for Transcending Childhood Trauma.
Wow,
and
nice.
I'm very proud of it, and I love it. And it's written for myself and for all the other people who felt like they didn't have a possibility of having a good life. Like, we can do it.
Yeah. And congratulations, because I know it's only just recently come out, and writing a book is an achievement. It's not easy. It really is it's a gift.
It was definitely a gift to myself to write it, and I'm very thankful that I had the ability to do it.
Yeah. As I said, thank you for joining us. And if anyone's got any questions for Mindy, pop them below. If you want to reach out, you'll find her details below the video. So you can also reach out. And what I'll do is I'll also pop a link to the book as well, so you can get access to the book if you want to get access to the book. But thank you once again for joining us. You're welcome.
Thank you, and best wishes, everyone, on your own healing journeys.